Good morning, this is Dwayne, and today we're going to take a look at dominant 7th chords. Dominant 7th chords are sometimes called the pregnant chord, and we'll talk about why they're called that sometimes. But they're used a great deal in the blues as well, but in normal music, I shouldn't say normal music, but music that's not the blues, they're a pregnant chord, and they are called that because they want to deliver, they want to move to the next chord. So, you know, a major triad is a root, third, and fifth of a major scale. That's a C major scale, so we take the root, third, and fifth, and we have a major triad, or a major chord. The sixth is right there, the sixth note of the scale, and the seventh of the scale is right there. But that's not a dominant seventh, that's called a major seventh. What we're talking about today is that chord. In other words, it's a lowered seventh. You can call it a flat seventh if you want, but most people call it a dominant seventh. If you took traditional theory and harmony, that would be called a dominant seventh. And that chord is not a stable chord. In other words, it wants to move. It wants to move. You see, that's stable. It doesn't want to go anyplace. That's stable. It doesn't want to go anyplace. That's a stable chord. Even though it's dissonant, it's still stable. It doesn't demand to be moved. But this chord implies that it wants to go somewhere, okay? And if you're familiar with the circle of fourths, the place it wants to go is up a fourth from the chord, the root chord, which is C. So it wants to go from C to F. So we have that normal progression, okay? And you've heard that a million times. Most songs in that way, by the way. Okay, so that's a dominant 7th chord. It's formed by lowering the 7th degree of the scale a half step. So let's go through all the major chords and make them dominant 7ths. Here's a D flat major chord based on the D flat scale, which goes like that. The 6th would be there, one whole step above the 5th, and the 7th would be there. So a dominant 7th is right there. In other words, you lower the 7th scale note. You see, that's the 7th note of the scale right there, isn't it? But we have, that's not the 7th we're talking about. We're talking about the dominant 7th, which is a half step below. So that's a D flat dominant 7th, or it could be called a C sharp dominant 7th, because that's an enharmonic note. It's both D flat and it's C sharp, depending on how it's used, okay? By the way, this note here would not be called B, it would be called C flat, because you're lowering the 7th scale degree, okay? And if you saw that notated in sheet music, it would be C flat, okay? Here's the D major chord based on the D major scale. The 6th is there and the 7th is there. So the dominant 7th would be right there. Okay, and that's a familiar chord you've heard a million times. D 7th going to G in the circle of fourths, okay? E flat major chord is like that because it's based on the scale of E flat, root, third, and fifth of the scale. The 6th is always a whole step above the 5th, not a half step, a whole step. And then the 7th would be there, right? But we got to lower the 7th, so that's a E flat dominant 7th. Here's the E major chord based on the root, third, and fifth of the E scale. There's the 6th, there's the 7th, so that would be the E dominant 7th chord. Let me move to the left hand now. The next chord is F. There's the F triad, F6, F dominant 7th. Not the major 7th, but lower the 7th, so it's a dominant 7th, okay? Here's the G flat or the F sharp major chord. That's the 6th, and that's a dominant 7th. Notice the dominant 7th is always a half step above the 6th. That's another way to find it quickly if you're looking for a shortcut. Okay, that's the G chord, G triad based on the scale of G. The 6th note is there, that's G6, so that would be G7 or G dominant 7th. By the way, in sheet music, the dominant 7th chord is just called 7th, G7th or C7th or whatever it is, okay? If the composer wanted a major 7th, he would say so. He'd say G Maj 7th, which would be there, okay? But if it just says G7th, then you would play that. Here's the A flat major chord based on the scale of A flat, root, third, and fifth. There's a 6th, and there's the dominant 7th. Here's the A major chord based on the A major scale, root, 3rd, 5th, 6th, the whole stuff above the 5th, and a dominant 7th is right there. That's A dominant 7th. B flat, D, and F, the root, 3rd, and 5th of the B flat scale. There's the 6th, and there's the dominant 7th. The B chord is based on the B scale, of course, and the 6th is there, and the dominant 7th is there. So I would advocate that you practice through all those chords just like I did. Start out with a major triad, go to the 6th, and then go to the dominant 7th so you can get a feel for getting to the 7th chord quickly. Okay, that's it for today. So if you enjoy these little series of tips, piano tips, and tips about chords and so on, then come on over to playpiano.com and sign up for our series of tips. Hope to see you there. So until tomorrow, I'll say goodbye.